Ready?
Let's fucking go.
Just rip ass.
Maybe. Men!
Hey there, film fans. I'm Jeff.
And I'm John, and welcome back to The Love of Cinema, a pod in which we'll challenge one another to discuss movies, both new and old, with a strictly positive critical eye.
That's right. And to avoid lazy negativity, we have decided to make this here episode a drinking game.
Oh.
That's right. Anytime you hear this sound...
Oh, I got it.
There it is.
Oh! No. There it is. Oh, okay.
If you hear us, that buzzer means that we have said something negative, and therefore we have to take a drink. We hope you drink along with us at home. Pour yourselves a glass. Let's go. Before we talk about men, we have to also acknowledge that Dave, who is our co-host and he produces this episode with us, is from Australia. Shout out to Queensland. Shout out to Adelaide. Shout out to Melbourne. Shout out
Don't
to
you try to name all the
Perth.
territories in the states and the
Shout out to everywhere else that Mad Max filmed.
all the places. Gold Coast, Cambria. What else do we know about Australia? That's it.
The place that burned in the fire. Oh, yeah.
Oh, come on. I got it. Yeah, sorry. Heal, Australia. Heal.
So anyway, heal. We are rooting for you and that ozone layer right above you and your coral reef. We're really fucking rooting for you.
So far, my favorite part of Dave's trip to Australia is he sent Jeff and I a picture of a leaf that looks like a dick and balls. That's so far. That is the highlight of Dave's vacation for me. He also went to Hawaii, which was awesome. He sent us some really fun pictures. Dave, we miss you, dude. Have fun. Enjoy your time off, dude.
And hopefully our fans don't, our listeners, I should say, or fans, if you consider yourself a fan, don't mind that the audio is going to sound a little different. A little different, not as good. We are jankety. Dave is our technician and master. And sorry, but deal with us. We'll have fun regardless, and you can pick on us about how shitty it sounded after the fact. He gave me very clear instructions of how to download OBS and run the buzzer file through it, and I didn't do it, but I really appreciate
it. He didn't do it. Oh boy!
It would, to be fair, and Dave knows this, it would crash my computer. Okay, so
true story.
We are two men talking about men. This is a dream podcast for every single person out there. I'm sorry, we got to keep it light here. We got to keep it light because that's gotta happen. Because I've seen other podcasts and other reviewers, all of whom were men. All the people who were laughing at this in the theater that I saw this, it was only male voices that I heard laughing at this. And this is definitely a movie.
Laughing at this, I can't wait to unpack that.
Well,
laughing at this.
There were some, I guess, moments of humor. I don't know if I personally laughed out loud, but there was laughter, and it was all male. For sure. And the men are definitely not the protagonists in this movie, which we can get to here in a second. But we're talking about it. So this is Men. That's right. It's called Men. It is written and directed by Alex Garland, who you may know from such films as Ex Machina, Annihilation, which we're still trying to figure out what that was about, and Devs, which, John, you saw, which was a limited series.
I did see it.
Hulu.
It was on Hulu.
This film, Men, stars Jessie Buckley as Harper, recent Academy Award nominee for The Lost Daughter.
Or just Lost Daughter? I can't remember.
I'll go through the IMDb billing. Oh, yeah. If you're new to the podcast, we'll try to keep it spoiler-free for a couple minutes. Rory Kinnear is in this movie, and not a lot of other big names that I would say. But we're going to keep it spoiler-free for like 5-10 minutes or so at tops. But before we actually dive into what we thought about the movie, the feel, let's go ahead and shout our people out really quick, John. Who are our sponsors?
Our people. Let's do it. We have a beer sponsor. His name is Carlos Barroso. You can find him on Instagram at cbarroso.beer. That is CBARROZO.BEER. Follow in the show notes if you want to just go straight there and give him a like, a love, a follow, all the things. Do it to us as well. Our information is in the show notes. And as always, the music provided at the beginning and end of every single episode is by the artist Dasein. Head on over to soundcloud.com/Dasein-artist, or just click that link in the show notes and you will be able to listen to all that music for free. Please support our sponsors. Please like, love, and talk shit about us, and we'll talk shit back to you. It's going to be a fun time.
We will talk shit back to you. It's usually Dave. So if you write in the next week,
you might get a response from Australia. It might be a leaf in the shape
of a penis. Oh my God, I hope
men.
Right. Man. Okay, here's what I would like to have on the agenda. Why don't we start with our initial takeaways, feeling, recommendations, etc., and then maybe we go pretty quickly to the spoilers. Or maybe right after that we could talk about. I kind of wanted to bring up the A.O. Scott review that I'd mentioned to you, where he talks.
Yeah, I read that today. We can talk about that.
He uses words like feminism and mansplaining and such, and I think that we can unpack it because men are going to see this movie and talk about it. Women are going to see this movie and talk about it. Maybe the conversation is going to be different, but that's part of this movie's experience, and I think everybody who made this film probably expected that. So we'll probably talk about that a little bit. And since there's a lot of allegory and fable, I kind of want to leave that more open-ended in the spoilers section. So if there is a way, and a little bit about Alex Garland and what you bring into this movie. Why don't we start with that, and then we'll do our initial takeaways. So obviously, Ex Machina is incredible. We did a podcast on. Did we do it? We never did Ex Machina, did we? I feel like we praise it periodically because it won the Oscar for Best Visual Effects. Obviously, the story is brilliant. It's digestible. It makes sense, which I think is the only of his movies that you can say, like, when you leave the movie, you get it. But I would say, I'm not going to look this up. I would say it probably has the smallest budget, the film budget, for a Best Visual Effects winner at the Oscars in decades. Like, that Ex Machina was such a little movie that could, and then it won fucking Best Visual Effects for all of that work it did.
That's probably a good argument for that,
to Alicia Vikander's character. You saw Devs. What do you think about Alex Garland coming into this, which I'm sure was a surprise?
Well, yeah, I mean, let's just refresh people and remind them that he came on the scene as the director of Ex Machina, but he was first, for over a decade, a very successful screenwriter. He wrote The Beach, he wrote 28 Days Later, and he wrote Sunshine. Two of those were very successful Danny Boyle movies that really launched his career as a director.
Probably influenced this one a little bit, actually, I would say.
I think so, too. I mean, so he's always like touching with some kind of horrific elements tend to find their ways into his worlds. He often plays with technology as a part of that, or some kind of major change in society. So I think he's I don't want to talk too much about this yet, but the weight of Alex Garland being the person who made this, I think, is why some people are having a tough time swallowing this one specifically. I'm going to unpack that statement more in the latter half of our show, but it's the anxiety of expectation of a certain kind of artist or whatever. And we can't help but project our own emotions onto work, especially when it has to do with us. And like, this is so, the allegory and the symbolism in this is so obvious. No, you're good. It's so obvious, and I think it's supposed to be, and I think some people are struggling with that. But my general takeaway is that I really enjoyed this film, and I completely understand why a lot of people are not enjoying this film. This is a quick one. It's an hour 40.
Yeah.
It felt like the old Bergman, like dark, he like lived around an hour and 30, hour and 40, Ingmar Bergman, and you just don't see movies that rock and roll like that much anymore. So this was, in one way, it was kind of refreshing just from an exhibition standpoint, because I haven't seen a movie this short that was a serious movie in a very long time. So that was kind of cool. Kind of caught me off guard. I didn't know that going in. The acting is remarkable. I don't care what anybody says. I think Rory Kinnear, this is not a spoiler because you figure it out very quickly. I think he plays multiple characters in this movie, and it's part of the symbolism and the commentary, and he's magnificent. And I'm obsessed with Jessie Buckley. I think I've only seen her do two things now, but God almighty, we praised the hell out of her in Lost Daughter, and she did not let me down here either. It reminded me of Us in the sense that Jordan Peele's film Us, just because, so often horror movies are associated with younger, lesser known actors, and therefore maybe a campier style. Not true with these. I mean, this movie took itself seriously, and the acting was top notch. And it was, I don't know, it was a movie about adults dealing with adult themes. And I'm always going to be in support of filmmakers getting a chance to make that kind of stuff. So it worked for me. I think there are things about the symbolism and the allegory that we're going to unpack more. And I understand why it's bothering people. I understand why some people don't even want to see this movie. But I think ultimately, I'm hoping I'm going to make an argument for why I think it works. But you have to stay tuned for that. Jeff, what do you think?
I'm 100% with you. A little bit about Jessie Buckley too. She was Juliet in a Romeo and Juliet. Those are greatest performances. So she's not like a come out of nowhere actress. Like she was a workhorse actress who now she has earned her moment. The Academy Award nomination was a surprise to a lot of people, probably including her. But now she's going to be in a whole bunch of shit. So
she's so fucking good, dude.
Yeah.
She's so good.
Get ready to see more of her. You brought up two things that are really interesting. Number one, and Us, Jordan Peele's Us. Jordan Peele's Us was very out there concepts. Also, I think it was trying to be genre subverting, but it had to get explainy at a certain point. Whereas this movie never tries to get explainy. It's funny, and you mentioned the other thing was that the allegory is obvious. I think what it balances really well is the obvious allegory with poetry, which is something that I don't see in a lot of the reviews, but there are references, direct references to poems in this, whether you actually know the poems or not. I didn't. I kind of looked these up afterwards, but poetry's notably abstract. Oh, fuck my logic, man. My logic just... Okay, let me get it rolling again.
Oh, you're good.
Technical
difficulty.
I'm in the middle of a fucking thought. Dave!
Oh, good shitty buzz there for you, too.
Damn it.
Okay. Now we're like totally paused. And Jeff, can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yeah, I can hear you. No, we're going to be great.
Jeff, can you hear me? Can you see me?
I can hear you. I can see you. Oh,
you're frozen. Great. I can hear you in a choppy way. You're frozen on my end.
I'm not doing anything out of the normal here. Here, let's let this settle. This is
good.
Wait
a second here.
Is this good audio, good video for everybody?
Can you rotate a little bit?
Yeah, now that you rotated, this is good. Wait, so let me get back into my thoughts. So A.O. Scott actually mentions Get Out as his genre-subverting film, and it's almost like conceptually it's closer to Us, but because Us gets explaining, I like Get Up in that its abstractness a little bit, just like a little bit more. Just kind of clicked for me. And A.O. Scott mentioned Get Out too, which is interesting. We're going to get to that article soon. But it's still nobody. You can't tell me exactly what this movie's about. Like nobody can, and I do actually really appreciate that. But at the same time, it's not so confusing that you leave bewildered. So like I left Annihilation, for instance, with I really liked it. The whole idea of the prism and the light reflecting and time acting differently and colors and age and all of that kind of stuff was so interesting. But ultimately I was like, I really don't know what this movie's about at all. Whereas this, because the allegory was right on the nose, and you see it in the trailer, so it's not a spoil, but the most obvious of which being she eats
the title.
Men, yes, but she gets to this house and there's an apple tree in the front yard and she eats the apple. So obviously it's Eve and it's so obvious. And there's the joke that Rory Kinnear makes, which is in the movie, which is like, oh, don't eat the apple, forbidden fruit and whatnot. Oh, just kidding. Huh. And it's like this bad joke, and he purposefully doesn't tell it well, but it's like so on the nose and so obvious. And then of course all of this terrible stuff starts happening afterwards, and we'll get a little bit more into it. But it gets so poetic, and it's like, Alex Garland has admitted he's intentionally subverting horror genre. So he literally says, I thought this would be a good horror thing, but I wanted to spin on it. So I don't know if he's admitting to something or if he's just not showing us the seams at all and he's just telling us what's on the surface. So, because I don't think that he would go into a film being like, how do I pretend to be a horror movie and flip it? Like, I do think that theologically there was more going on. I think he actually is very well read, and I think he had an intention that he'll never explain to us. You know, I'm not saying this is like 2001, but it's like a 2001 where they intentionally left it out there for everybody to interpret. And it works. This definitely works for me. I'll see it again. I'm still not going to know much more, but I'm curious to engage with this more. That's what I say.
Fuck yes, dude. I'm so glad you said that. When we walked, Elizabeth and I saw this together, and that's going to be part of my commentary. I think we'll go into spoilers very soon. But she asked me, she was like, do you think Jeff's going to like this one? And I said, I think he will.
Elizabeth, ask me. You reach out to me sometimes. Ask me, I'll tell you.
Because we were just talking about how like all of us like Alex Garland a lot. And I was like, you know what? He seems to be one of the guys that like, you don't even need to love his movies or understand his movies for all three of us to tend to agree that he's worth watching. Like even the ones that are, like you're saying, are headier or not very understandable. We keep using this phrase. There's one of my professors at school that keeps using this phrase whenever they're watching our stuff in a complimentary way. If somebody has earned it, where they say, we're in safe hands. I feel like I'm in safe hands.
Yeah.
And God damn it, we can pick apart this movie if we want. And I understand why for some people they will never get on board, but you are in safe hands. Alex Garland knows what the fuck he's doing. And all of this was the movie he wanted to make. And whether or not you agree with it, that there is intention behind him. It's poetic. So I think that's why it's so lovely. And I think that I think it's better than it's getting credit for. And I remember when I walked out, I was like, that was kind of exactly what I wanted this to be in a transcendent way. It surpassed my expectations in a lot of strange ways. And I think I said something like, that's the kind of movie I wish I had the nuts to make. Like I wish when I'm on top like him, getting anything I made, I want to get made. I wish I have the balls to go out and make this movie, which is so crazy. It felt like a first time director's art movie. You know what I mean? Like that really, let me try to set myself apart. He was like, no, I can make movies like this. And I can go, I don't know. I'm just so excited, so proud that he was able to get it made. And fuck all the haters. I can't wait to talk about it more.
Well, my brother sent me something really interesting that isn't about this movie, but it's about, who the fuck was it that was complaining about if studios only fund big budget movies, which isn't going to happen. And honestly, the streamers might actually save us here. So I'm never going to be anti Amazon Prime, even though they don't pay taxes. I'm never going to be anti-Netflix, even though they're going to take they're going to not let me use John's password anymore. I'm never going to be anti these places, because the truth is and we were not so hot on the North Bin, but the fact that there are still movies being made with somewhat of a budget by directors to say what they want to say. I do hope it includes more than just men, because I just mentioned 2 male movies, but I hope Maggie Gyllenhaal will get money that's not going to necessarily be from Netflix. She'll keep getting money. Like other directors will keep getting to make these kinds of movies. And I hope we can see them in the theaters. I'm sure it would be fine on TV too. But like, even if you're confused, even if you think if it was taciturn or it didn't close for you, you didn't like the ending, maybe you got bored at certain points. The fact that there are directors who get to make what they want to make, I think is a good thing with a budget. Because there's always going to be a student director making money that nobody's going to see, that their parents paid for. But like, no disrespect to that. But like, this is a third movie. And I don't know if he would have gotten this made first if he didn't have Ex Machina and then, of course, Annihilation. But really, Ex Machina is his golden ticket. Same thing with Eggers making The Witch, which again was the movie that he wanted to make. But I don't think he makes The Northman if he doesn't make The Witch. So.
Chris Nolan was in a Q&A somewhere once, and they said, how did you get the studio to let you make Prestige? And his answer was, you make Batman Begins.
Yeah. But it's cool that these directors don't have to make a Batman movie. You know what I mean? So I feel like we should celebrate.
They don't have to. But no, yeah, I know. Yeah, I totally know what you mean. Well, let's get into it, dude, because I think it's not even spoilery, but I feel like I don't want to cloud anyone's judgment with our opinions. Like it's this, Jeff, you nailed it, dude. This is closer to poetic cinema in a sense, with the horror genre being there. You're definitely going to get scared and disturbed and grossed out. There's some body horror and stuff. A lot of dread in this movie. So like, please don't read anything about it. Just go watch it and let it kind of wash over you. And then you can listen to the rest of this if you want to and hear us what we think. Because I do think I got a lot out of this. Elizabeth and I had a good conversation in the car. And if I like talking about his movies just a little bit, just to kind of gather my thoughts. So you might want to listen to this when you're done, but do not read any articles. Don't listen to people talk about it. I think you should go watch it cold.
Well, can I just mention this? I'll bring up the article. I swear we're going to talk about the movie more in depth to all of you other people out there. But can I bring up the A.O. Scott thing really quick? Just the last line.
Dude, bring it up, dude.
So he mentions the poems, and the 2 poems specifically that he mentions are Leda and the Swan, which is a poem I read for this because I was very curious about it. And apparently it's this poem where a woman sees a swan and it's a beautiful animal. And the swan is actually Zeus in the form of a swan who rapes her. And, she was taken advantage by the god of thunder in the worst imaginable possible way. And they call that out when they were like, I'm a swan. I was really interested in the movie. I was like, what does that even mean? And it's a direct relation to this. And then when the vicar later quotes the
Sirens,
Ulysses and the Sirens.
Yeah,
Ulysses is Odysseus, and it's from the Odyssey. And he's essentially saying that the sirens are going to warp. They're going to drive men crazy. So he makes all of the men close their ears so they can't listen to the sirens, because it's the sirens' fault that the men go crazy. Because in this movie, a lot of it is blame. A lot of it is it's the woman's fault. She experiences a very serious loss of her husband. That's not a spoiler. That's very early in the film, and she's going to this place by herself to get away from that. And everything's her fault is basically how this is sort of. That's to unravel this, and I don't actually mean that. I'm saying in the film, what's represented is this idea that when men are being aggressive, they blame the woman. They blame the woman for all of their ills and for all of their faults, and that's definitely something that he takes head on. So A.O. Scott mentions these poems, and he talks about poetry and allegory fable. This is A.O. Scott from the New York Times. He's one of their top critics. And at the end of the article, his last line is, "There isn't really an argument here, and what looks like feminism is more like mansplaining." And there's two things that stand out. Number one, there isn't really an argument here. Why does there have to be? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, he's presenting all of these things, but he's not a lawyer. He's not defending he's not making a case. He's making a film. So I don't even understand why A.O. Scott. It's almost like he needed a final line and he just wanted it to be flashy. I'm very confused as to why he said there isn't an argument here. There are plenty of films out there that aren't an argument. They're an exploration. They're a slice of life. There's so many. You don't have to argue for anything. But then, of course, feminism and mansplaining, these are important because, yes, these are men making movies where men are the antagonist. And this is also about a woman going through grief. So it's like the question, I don't want to sit here and like defend men and say like we should be able to make movies about women. That's not my point. My point is, why is it that any time that a man in this particular moment takes on this kind of issue, it's either feminism, mansplaining, or both? Like, why is it that A.O. Scott, of all people, is quick to jump to these terminology when it almost seems like the allegory and the poetry it's almost like he was like, I know this stuff exists. This is Alex Garland. So I just want to explore it. And this is what I want to do. And if somebody else wants to do that too, that's totally great. But like, I hope I can work on this too. I hope that I have a space in this. I don't want to take that space away from anybody else. I don't want to pretend like I'm the voice of reason on feminism or whatever. If this isn't even a feminist film, which I don't know that it is either. I don't know why A.O. Scott chose that word, but it's very curious when it comes to men making movies and men talking about movies. It's a very male-dominated industry. That one of the chief critics at the New York Times immediately is like, this is mansplaining. But it's not explaining anything, this movie. So it's very curious. What is your take on this, John? As somebody who's making films, so I don't want to throw you into the lion's den of this sensitive issue. But
I think Alex Garland definitely made this on purpose with exactly what you're saying. I don't know the man, but I've heard him speak quite a bit in interviews, and he seems to be someone who is aware enough of what he thinks art and intellectualism should do in terms of commentary and how it should interact with these kinds of issues in society. And I would imagine that he doesn't think that these things are off limits. My biggest point that I think I'm going to try to unravel in my feedback on this film is that this movie was not made for women. I don't think it was made for women to see. I think every sensation that Jessie Buckley experiences, women experience without the horror of this movie. And I think men, and I think he honestly made this, and this is what I was talking about, the indicative, obvious nature of it. It's not, I don't think he's trying to hide. It's interesting that he used a vehicle of poetic, cinema to try to talk about something that is so obvious. If I had to say something to rebut against the critics, it would be that sometimes I think men, and I think Alex Garland knows this, I think he probably sees it in himself, and that's why he chose to make this movie, is that if we don't find the most interesting intellectual way to try to prove a point that could simply be felt very, very easily, then it has lesser value. And I think this whole reason, this whole thing that he was trying to make, and I think he did it in such an interesting way, is that this it is a fact. It is a fact that like half of the world feels this way often. This blame, this interrogation, this intimidation, the fear, the constant relentlessness pursuit. There are so many. We're starting to get into spoiler territory, folks, so feel free to sign off. I don't know if we need to make it official, but let's just start. There are so many aspects of beauty that are literally just cinematic, gorgeous beauty. There's a sequence where she goes on a walk, and he is very clearly just like flexing like cinematography muscles.
It's early. It's in the trailer. Yeah.
Gorgeous, like it's about her being affected by nature. She's seeking the solace and this peace, and she's getting it. And then at the end of this tunnel, a fucking naked man stands up and just starts walking toward her. Literally, like, it doesn't get more obvious to me than that. Dick out. This guy just starts walking toward her, and immediately there is sexuality and there is fear and intimidation. And
for the rest of the movie.
For the rest of the movie. It is sustained. It goes up. It gets grosser and weirder. And Rory Kinnear plays every single man. Alex Garland isn't trying to hide that. It's fucking obvious. The actor plays every single man. So they all become this man. So I feel like this is just like, to what, I don't know, to him, I would say that, damn, what's his name?
Rory Kinnear.
Yeah. No, excuse me. The critic.
Oh, A.O. Scott.
A.O. Scott. I would say that, like, this is just one of those things where, like, it's almost like if you were expecting some intellectual, orgasmic epiphany of he finally figured out a way to get me to think into what these women are feeling, then you're never going to actually understand what women are feeling, because women feel this way. They don't think this way. And I'm not saying that is a black and white statement, that it's linear, but I think Alex Garland was trying to get us to understand that that's why it's poetic. If you are trying to intellectualize all of these issues that we're talking about with the conflict in gender, then you're missing the whole fucking point. The point is that this is how men make women feel every single fucking day. And it was just so obvious to me when we were leaving the theater that, like, it affected me in so many interesting and different ways. And I think Elizabeth was just more like, there was nothing new for me in that movie. Like, even with all the really crazy body horror and the way the gore is used is very, sensually.
A lot of interestingly placed vaginas, for sure.
Unbelievable. But I still ultimately do believe that, like, this is if you're a man that is waiting for the intellectualization, if that's even a fucking word, of this issue, then you might be part of the problem, because it's a lot simpler than that. And I think this movie is simple for a reason.
Well, and actually the allegory, the blanket of this allegory of Adam and Eve, the man, it's I think it's pretty obvious that. So there's an inciting incident. I'm teaching this Into the Woods medley right now at school. Sorry for anybody who's not a musical theater fan, but it's one of the stories is Little Red Riding Hood, but she actually understands that the wolf is an aggressor. It's basically like, if she survives it, like, now her innocence is dead. It's the death of innocence, I would say, is what the I Know Things Now is about. And she even says at the end, like, now I know, this stuff happens. Like, it's great to know a lot, but a little bit not. And it's like one of the most brilliant endings of a song, because it's like, you know what? Innocence is great. Like, we need to know these things so that we can live, because if we don't know these things, we will fucking die. But it kind of sucks that we have to know these things. And in this, she eats the apple. And the only man she has seen up until this point is Jeffrey, who's the guy in the trailer, and he's very country, as they like to say. It's Rory Kinnear, and he's got fucked up teeth, and he's making bad jokes, toothy. And then as soon as she eats the apple, the next man she meets is this guy in the woods who's very obviously Adam. He's naked, and he has fucking trees growing out of him. Like, I would say he's Adam if she's Eve. And from there on, every man is its turn. So again, it's this idea of, like, men are blaming, like, it's her, like, they could try to frame it like it's her fault for eating the apple, which is such horseshit. That's like the birth of patriarchy, essentially, is when fucking Eve eats this goddamn apple. But yeah, you're right. You nailed that whole sequence. You're exactly what you're saying. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. They have the choral music is incredible. I'm a fucker. I'm a fucker. Sorry. I'm a sucker for choral music. Also, really quick, let me give you a little musical lesson here. So this is Into the Unknown, as you have this. That's from Frozen 2, which is the same as Squid Games. What the fuck was that? I was in a musical moment, you asshole. God damn it. What the shit?
Just came on. I don't know. That was not Squid Games. What was Squid Games? Tell me what Squid Games.
That's hilarious. Is that your ringtone?
I was using the speaker and it's attached to the TV. She must have turned on a television show. My bad. All right, I'm joking.
So Squid Game is exactly the same as Into the Unknown. It's over and over again. And what it is, it's based on 4 notes, and the high note and the notes fall the notes are falling. So in classical, or this actually Chloe gave me this, but from choral music and classical music, it's essentially like the descent into hell or into death is these descending notes that want to stay up high. They want to stay here, but they can't help it. They keep kind of dripping down. So they play with that same idea in this tunnel, and they have this, which sounds very major, but they make it fucking haunting and dissonant, and they do it over and over and over and over again. So it's almost like it sounds bright and it sounds nice, but then Adam is essentially born as a predator, and from then on, this beautiful landscape, everything about it is terrifying, everything about it is haunting, and it's like innocence is dead, and everywhere she goes in this town is a risk. She can't even go to a fucking church because there's a 12-year-old boy that tells her to fuck off with the creepy, CGI, which is almost intentionally like, it's almost like they were like, let's do the Irishman, but the opposite and fucking creepy. Yeah. And then the vicar, the priest, who basically says like, but wait, if, is it your fault that your husband killed himself? Because, he wouldn't have killed himself. Maybe there's another way of handling this. And, it's like, she can't even go to a priest about this. It's like, and maybe back to your point about, yeah, go ahead.
That scene was, I think my two favorite scenes in terms of like what we're talking about are the vicar's scenes. And the first one, he does what men do. I think there is an intellectual analysis of her trying to cope with her ex-partner's suicide, potential suicide, possible suicide, whatever, I guess, however we choose to believe what it was. And it's not it's not helpful to her to try to understand.
You don't think so?
I mean, it has very little to do with like the grief itself, and more about trying to, I don't know. I felt like that struck such an appropriate tone that I feel like I have heard like in passing and secondary over the past several years since the Me Too movement, especially when men try to kind of very calmly and intellectually try to poke holes in the logic of,
and try to get her to confess. It actually seemed like he was defending. He was asking her provocative questions, almost to get like a vicar tactic to almost say like, but if you did this, then maybe that.
Yes.
Leading question. And so like, and she said, there was like, wait a second, you can't fuck me up. Like, I'm from London. Like, you can't do this to me. Like, I see what you're doing and it's bullshit.
And this whole thing builds, again, we're kind of going all over the place now, but this whole movie is building and building. It gets to this point where the men become, I kind of don't want to reveal how exactly they become one. I know we're in the spoiler section.
We'll get there.
But there's a scene later in the movie where the vicar confronts her again inside her home. And he says a few very poignant lines, I think it's just the nutshell, again, of that sensational thing, the way women probably feel. And I think it doesn't even matter if it's 100% objectively true. It is totally subjective. Where the vicar says to her, he quotes the line from the poetry that you were talking about earlier. And then he says, I have convinced myself that you are an expert in all things conical, that you know exactly what to do and what to have done to you. And I blame you for it. Like,
yeah.
And like
man, so
that, literally, it's like Alex Garland could not, I'm sure, I want to know like how much time he spent on trying to find the most succinct way to say that I am a man of God, whatever. I'm sure that, the symbolism had a lot to do with it, but I'm a man. And because I am so convinced that you know exactly how to fuck, it is all your fault.
Yeah.
Like, anything that happens to you is your fault. Like, and it's on, right. And I just feel like, yeah, we can talk about the intellectual again. Like, I understand what people are saying, like, God, that's so obvious, but you know what? It is that fucking obvious. And I'm not a woman, but I have a feeling that's why they're so goddamn angry about these there is no conversation anymore. There's no need to have the conversation. That's what it feels like. Shut the fuck up. Just deal with it. That's exactly what it feels like.
That's right.
Stop fucking making us feel like we're fucking sexual victims. Like, it's just ridiculous.
So my biggest takeaway, not to jump right to the end of this, but I'm hoping people listening to this really want a more in-depth conversation and we're not ruining the movie for them. But the idea that Rory Kinnear plays everybody, it's got to be
brilliantly, by the way. He's wonderful.
He's
in all
so
of his,
great.
He's so good in everybody. It's unbelievable.
Really is great.
His point of view is so specific.
Honest, I know this sounds crazy. I saw the trailer. I didn't know for like half an hour into this movie that it was him doing everybody. It wasn't until it was the kid where I was like, okay, for sure. Because I saw it in the Eve character, but the Adam character, but it kind of looked like the dad's Stellan Skarsgård in Dune, where it's like he almost looks different. Like I don't know. I was like, well, maybe it's just somebody who looks like him. It wasn't until the kid's face where I was like, is this a 12-year-old motherfucker? God damn it, they're all fucking Rory Kinnear. So back to the overplay of the Adam versus Eve. Also, we have to acknowledge the fact that this movie is probably filmed in 2021. They know what was going on in the world. They're aware. Like, come on. I know Alex Garland's British, by the way. He's not American, but the conversations are happening everywhere. He knows what we're talking about, and the idea that. The idea of the patriarchy, really, it all comes back to Adam and Eve. That we're still blaming, by we I mean men, are still blaming women for something that didn't happen. Right? It fucking didn't happen. I'm sorry, it didn't happen. And so this is all her fault. So the idea that Rory Kinnear is playing everybody, and I think it gets done pretty well in this weird birthing sequence that happens over and over again, which I want to talk about her, because we keep talking about the guys, but I want to talk about her reaction to this and the boredom that she gets out of the monotony of the villain, the monotony of the grotesque of the male, which I got too. I was like, I'm bored of this now. And so does she, but it's like, one man is every man the same way that one woman is every woman. So if we're going to blame all women for Eve, which again is bullshit, but like it seems to be that is where patriarchy is founded on, then if there's one man outside, it's every man, and vice versa. Like if it's like one man is capable of all of these qualities, like even if it's somebody like as charming and country as Jeffrey, he could be the vicar who fucks her life up, and Adam who wants to stand outside naked and stare inside and blame. You know what I mean? Like he is all of these people. At the same way, all of these men are Adam, who, like it or not, continue to conceive with Eve and still blame her for things. You know what I mean? Like, or whatever. So I thought that was played really well at the end. And again, I still don't understand the movie to say it like that.
Well, let's walk that out, because
really
I'm glad you brought that up, because let's be specific now, just so everybody can catch up with this, because let's assume you have watched the movie. So this terrorizing starts to happen over the second or third night that she's there. She doesn't leave. She decides to stay. She starts to realize that they're the same men. They're all attacking her house, and like the lights go on and off outside, and they just disappear. And then another one of them, appears. Again, this is like Rory Kinnear is playing all these people. So this terrorizing starts to happen. And this very interesting thing takes place where it's the Adam character initially who really does approach her and attack her. And then he reaches his hand through the mail slot and she stabs him. And the knife ends up like splitting his hand apart, which is a mirror image to what her ex-partner's suicide.
So graphic, man. That was Oh my God.
His final dying position. She goes outside in a flashback and finds him, and he's lying in this very specific position where his arm is split in half, and he's got a really bad broken leg. And she injures this Adam character. And then every character who she starts to encounter, all these men, have the same injury. So again, there is no mystery here. All this is on purpose. Very simple. The interesting thing is that if you're focusing on what's Alex Garland going to do next, what's the next line, what's the next way he's going to show the man, you're missing the best part about this sequence, which is what you said, dude. It is almost like a boredom, but I don't even know if it's poetry, so maybe you wouldn't take it as boredom, but there is a change in the way she starts to perceive the threat of these men. And she does almost...
She pities them.
Yes, there is a pity, and it started making me... We have a wonderful acting teacher that Jeff and I both had at one point, and I just hear the word status in my head whenever I'm watching scenes of any kind, and I couldn't stop thinking about what was happening to her status, because for a large part of the early half of this movie, which again is not super long, he is playing with very traditional Hitchcockian suspense, terror, horror, people outside, watching her, lights going off, doors being left open, real classic things, and they work. He's really good at it. But when you get to this point, you start seeing her realize that like all that status that was taken away from her, which is fun commentary on the horror genre in general, she starts to kind of just get bored with it. And she starts to the look on her face, which again, Jessie Buckley, I don't know. I also know that Alex Garland doesn't like talking to actors about intention stuff. He doesn't like directing. He really doesn't. He really prefers it. He said this multiple times. I like actors who are independent, who bring a lot to the table. I don't really want to talk about it. And she has so much of the last half of this movie, she doesn't really speak at all. It's just her dealing with this absurd thing where all these men start appearing in different forms and talking to her. And every time she starts to take more status away from them, it's like every time they would hurt her, come closer to her, threaten her, she's wielding a knife for the last half of this movie, and she somehow stabs them at the end of every one of them. And it's almost like this is the essence of this movie for me. And we'll get to it in a moment, but it builds to the very end, which is the exclamation point to this statement, that it's almost like she gets kind of tired of having to let these men exhaust themselves with some kind of expression or threat, and then she just has to get rid of them again. It's like at the end of every scene, she's like, and now you're stabbed. Yeah. And now you're going to get hurt. And now I just have to back up because there's nothing you can do to stop me.
They come quicker and quicker, right? Like the birthing starts to come quicker and quicker. And it's like, actually, I think weakness and strength is another masculine feminine thing. Like I think historically, at least in human history, not necessarily in lore or in actuality, but in recorded history, you know, it's what is masculine is strength and femininity isn't, which is hilarious because no man that I know would ever want to give birth. I think that's like the ultimate sign of strength.
Yeah.
But her when the guy's reaching his arm through right before the stabbing, right before he grabs her arm, which is okay. So this whole sequence is, she locks the door, which is just like a normal like female. Again, she can't even just like have a minute at home by herself. Like these guys are everywhere.
And go right before. Sorry to back you up, but go right before. How does she get inside? That might be my favorite sequence in the movie. Adam appears to her and blows his seed all over her.
Which is the dandelion, which by the way,
is like dandelions.
And dandelions is a weed, and so these are dead weeds essentially. And with
it's
dead
so
weeds
poetic.
Grow life, but they grow weeds. They grow. So you look at a dandelion, like it looks like a flower, but it's not. It's a fucking weed. I think it was very well chosen. I know because my mom fucking hates them, and every time I saw them, I was like, I had to fucking pick their.
She breathes this in though. She breathes in the weed. It goes like slow motion. It's very, hypnotic. Very, very poetic and hypnotic. And she almost you almost can't even clock how she gets inside. Cool. But it's not done traditionally. It's not in real time. She doesn't run away from him. It's really beautiful. So anyway, keep going. She's stuck inside.
And then Adam isn't this guy who's a stalker and he's naked, which is terrible, but he's also not physically aggressive, which is important for this moment. I'm not saying that's okay, obviously, but so she goes inside the house and she locks the door. Also, remember, at this point, Rory Kinnear has changed character. She's already been outside with Jeffrey, who disappeared, and then so like she sees Adam, yes, but there's a lot going on. It's not just this one guy. Like we're past the point of obviousness. We're in pure poetic like. We're off the rails here, but she locks the door, and this character, I'll call him the Adam character, even though he has more plants. He reminded me of Silas from Da Vinci Code, the guy who slaps himself. And isn't that the guy who's Vision? Isn't that him? He plays Silas.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, so he sticks his hand through the letter opener, and builds into the door,
the door slot, whatever, mail slot.
And she takes his hand. There's a million explanations for why she does that. I don't think any of them should be like, that's a mistake. It's her fault that he grabs her or whatever. But like she takes his hand. Maybe she pities him. I don't know. He's like reaching and she grabs his hand. And then of course he grabs her, which you could perhaps say is like a masculine sign of strength. Like, oh, I can grab you. And then she fucking stabs him. And rather than Alex Garland be like, you got me. No, he pulls his hand out slowly and it gets split open and now we're just like realism is gone. That's not even strength and weakness is gone. And now we're in a different world because all it is now is basically like, how could you do that to me? Again, blaming her for the violence that really came from him reaching his hand. You know what I mean? It's like this. Mm-hmm. And so it's so bizarre. It really is like the prism in Annihilation, where it's like everything is refracted so much at this point that it's like you go along for the ride. And all I knew from there for the next like 5 minutes is she closes the door, and then a different guy approaches. And then she opens the door, and it's like the monotony of guys, and she's not, her innocence is dead. Back to my little red idea. It's dead. It's dead. And now it's to the point where it's not like she's prepared for it. She's built her forts. It's like, just take me. Like, I know this is going to end up in the bathroom, and it's going to be a confrontation, and it's like what she has to do. And again, I'm not saying that's like the right thing to do. I'm not saying men have figured this out, but it was really powerful the way it was done to go into the siren thing with the vicar that we talked about already in that bathroom.
I would even say that this is. I wouldn't even say it's full on poetic cinema at that point, because it's still something is clearly happening. But I still felt like I was watching a horror movie where we were supposed to know that they were all the same guy. So there is an absurd,
this is as my friend Nate would say, this is Cronenberg horror at this point now.
Yes,
this is no longer Hitchcockian, because you can see it. You see it all. It's really the grotesque.
It is very Cronenberg, horror. But the real grotesque. All right, so let's keep going just so people can track us, because I think we're building towards the ending, which is going to be tough to unpack.
I'm curious.
There's a place in this movie where after the vicar scene, she does, again, we kind of return to horror traditionalism. She runs out of the house after that scene in the bathroom with the vicar, where I said he says, "You're an expert at sex and fuck you." And she eventually stabs him, gets some more status back. And then it's kind of taken away from her again, because she runs out of the house and gets in her car and tries to drive home. Like tries to fuck this place. I'm going to leave it.
False ending. Yeah.
And she hits Jeffrey, the toothy country British guy, and just fucking runs him over. He flips over the car, breaks his leg in the exact same way that her ex-partner's leg was broken when she found him after falling.
Which was a fucking horrifying corpse, by the way.
That was Cronenberg. Yeah, that was Lynch. That was Cronenberg. Ooh, so after that happens, she realizes Jeffrey stands up and his leg is broken, and you're like, what the fuck? And she kind of runs away. And this is when the moment really happens. And she's standing in her yard that we've been in a lot, and this light, the shaft of light is pouring in, and it doesn't look realistic at all. It's not from her headlights. Something crazy is happening. And then the Adam character returns in this amazing sequence where this character starts to give birth, and one of the men is born. I can't remember who's born
now
first.
In 2022. If you listen to Republicans, men give birth now.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah. Fuck you.
Sorry,
fucking Republican leadership.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, buzz those motherfuckers. Jesus fucking Christ. This sequence is where the men start giving birth to each other. So it's not multiple men appearing. It's one man that literally his stomach gets larger, and he goes down to the ground and collapses. And for the first several times, one of the version of the men comes out of where the vagina would be. At one point, it comes out through the back. At one point, it comes out through the mouth. And it is, yeah, you're right, Cronenberg body horror.
This is Nate. Shout out Nate.
And while you were looking at that, again, that thing we were talking about earlier is so poignant. Every time they cut back to her, she's not like, oh my God, what am I going to do? She's just it's almost like she's numb. She's looking at it with this just like, it's almost like you're asking me to understand and deal with the fact that there's nothing I can do about the fact that you're always going to be there, that you're never going to stop, and that this is just something I'm going to have to live with. And for a while, it almost got monotonous for me. Like he did it up to a point where I was like, okay, what the hell is he about to say? Until the last one is the mouth. And as the feet are coming out of the mouth, you can kind of tell if you're looking, because there's a lot of interesting play with the way they light these scenes. It looks darker skinned.
These effects people, man, what a task.
It's gorgeous, dude. I know. I don't know.
They spent a year on this of feet coming out of the mouth.
And once again, dude, special effects, like visual effects, just like Ex Machina, this was brilliant. Like those, I don't know how they did that birthing stuff, but her ex-partner,
it's practical. Okay.
Can you imagine? Her dead ex-partner was a black man, and the final birth is you see these feet coming out of, I think it's the vicar's mouth, and you can tell that like, are those? He shows you just a little bit, and then she goes into like the sitting room, which is like her favorite room, where one of the first like threats really happened, where you saw Adam outside, and she's back in there where beauty exists. I'll bring us back to that theme. The piano room. It's the sitting room. It's the piano room where she was playing the piano at one point until the memory of her ex-partner, ruined it. So the beauty is taken again. And her ex-husband, I don't even know if they're married. Yeah, they were married because she wanted to get a divorce.
They're married, yeah.
So this is the end of the movie, folks. All that birthing, the body horror, this thing is happening. Again, you get it. There's nothing really, it is poetic, but you also are like, I understand what I'm feeling now. It's not a new feeling every time a new man is born. You start to understand it. And then her ex-husband dead.
They're all coming out with the split hand, so you know it's the same person.
The broken leg, the split hand, the exact same injuries. They all have the exact same injuries, and they're covered in blood and all this stuff. Like they're born. He wobbles in totally naked, just like the Atom, and she has that same look on her face of just like she's over it, or however you want to read into it. But it isn't shock. It isn't horror. She is aware of what she is feeling, and she understands it, and she doesn't run away. She doesn't try to escape out the window. She doesn't scream. She just looks at him, and they have a very simple conversation where she basically says, what do you want from me? This is the first time she's spoken in like 40 minutes. I mean, it felt like half the movie. Like she really just stopped talking at some point. And she finally says, like, what do you want from me? And he says something just like, all I wanted was your love, or your love.
Oh, man.
And then boom, blackout. So this whole thing, again, like we really did just describe like most of the movie. It's very understandable. And then there's this crazy, gory, poetic sequence at the end that just builds to this very simple scene where, and this is where the poetry comes in. For me, I felt like this was all about the status and her ultimately realizing that in a world that has this kind of threat of misogyny, she'll never even have the right to grieve according to how she actually feels about it. Like it will never actually be up to her to feel as deeply as she could, even if she feels like she was vindicated by initiating the divorce or whatever reasons led her to going into that tragedy. The whole point of these flashbacks, folks, sorry, we probably should have just mentioned this. Again, if you've seen it, you already know. But she was trying to divorce him. And from the very beginning, in all the flashbacks, you realized that he was trying to say the whole time, if you divorce me, I'll kill myself. It started with that threat. And so it just brought me back to this ultimate gross. I had a smile on my face by the end of this, just because I think Alex Garland was just that simple, essential thing. He was just trying to say that if you are looking for more than this out of these issues that we're having in society, about the way we're talking about this topic, then you're searching for something that doesn't need to exist. It's not that it doesn't, or it doesn't need to exist.
Do you think also this is what he could be insinuating? And again, we'll never know. We'll never know. But maybe he's also saying that actually the strongest, most powerful force is a woman's love. And that's really, it's like, if men don't have that, we're nothing. We don't even want to be alive.
I think there's probably room for all of that. I think there's also their interpretation of, because we can't seem to love, like to actually, we can't stand the idea of like being hurt without, the vulnerability, the lack of vulnerability, men, that we actually, we are taking all of our strength from women. I think that could be seen that way. I could even open it up enough for him to say that there is room for him to be making light of the fact that if you think this allegory is this simple because this is a binary issue, then maybe we're all oversimplifying this. And, that goes against the whole point that I'm saying. But I think it's possible that he's saying nothing is this simple. And if we don't talk about it, and the fact that she doesn't speak for half the movie might be something that he's also saying, that, even though these are emotional things, the guy at the beginning in the flashback didn't really have much to say. He got pissed at her, he punched her in the face, and he jumped off the fucking balcony. So maybe that, like, this lack of dialogue is actually part of the problem as well. But ultimately, I think if this is I know what you're saying about, like, I want to give the streamers might give us a chance to make movies that wouldn't be seen otherwise. But
yeah, I'm still skeptical of that. But
I'm skeptical too. But also, this is a challenging movie, and I think a lot of people would turn it off if they were at home.
You're right.
And I think submitting to the theater, like just like putting yourself in it, I think it's kind of necessary for this kind of movie because it is so gory and aesthetically gruesome. There's something to it, right?
What do you think about the ending? You think it was all in her head? You think that was? You think that they want to put that on the table? And do you think he put it on the table that like when the friend finally shows up, this is sort of like it's like a borderline after credit scene. Do you think Alex Garland wanted to put it in our head like, oh, maybe this didn't happen, maybe it was all in our head, and then you have to sit there and go, wait a second, I missed the movie if I think this was all in her head.
Yeah, this is a. Tell them what you're talking about. This is a tag. Like the movie ends with him coming onto the couch and then saying, I want your love. And then there's
only one woman that she interacts with in the whole movie. And it's a police officer who doesn't believe her. Well, it's not that she doesn't believe her. Also, it's very important. And I haven't seen a single review mention this. It's not like I got everybody like, oh, I got you. You didn't mention this. But she never shows the goddamn picture that she took of the guy I'll call him Adam, in front of the country house in the woods. She doesn't show them to the cops. She doesn't show them to Jeffrey. She doesn't show that picture to anybody. And that's one of those weird movie things that's deliberate. And I wonder why. Because if she showed a picture, there's a naked man who's following it. Here he is. If she showed that picture, end of story. This is over. That's the stalker. He's naked. He's staring at her. And then he followed her home. It's done. She never shows it. And that's a very interesting choice. But so I'm very curious as to why she didn't show this other woman that. Because you would think she would show, again, this movie's made for men. I agree with you. If you show this female cop and you're a female, this naked man, I saw him there. And then an hour later, he's in front of my house naked. He followed me home. Now he's a stalker. Now you can't release him from prison. You can't release him from jail, which is what happens in this movie. But she doesn't show the picture, and she doesn't even sit there and goes, it's about back to the original fucking allegory of Adam and Eve, which is why it was so important that it had to be so obvious, as you mentioned before, is it's about faith. Religion's all about faith. The Garden of Eden didn't happen. It certainly didn't happen the way we think it did. I'm sorry. Dinosaurs came first. They were already around by the time the gardens, you know.
Sorry, Mormons.
Sorry, dude.
Dinosaurs came first.
Mushrooms were here 1 billion years before. Like, come on. Yeah. You got to be realistic here. It's a story, all right? It's not real. All right. I'm sorry. It would take more than a couple thousand years for us to put 7 billion people on this planet. Even if you did the math, there's no way we get to 7 billion starting from 5,000 years ago. It's just not possible. So anyway, with this, back to my point, it's about faith. The woman didn't believe her. Why should she have to show a picture of this guy in order for him to not be released from jail because he didn't do anything wrong? And why can't they just, you know what I mean? So it's
no, it's not. And I thought they did a good job of it.
To conclude, we don't see her with the friend until the very end. But if you're the friend seeing this fresh-faced female, and all she sees is the car accident and her friend sitting outside, you think this is all in her friend's head. You think it's all in her head, right? And Alex Garland basically is leaving it with the question: did you think this was all in her head, or did you do her?
And this is, I think he did. I think he did such a good job of making all the shit we've been told, the poetic, all that stuff, that the literal answer to that question didn't matter to me at all.
Yeah, of course,
by the time I got there,
the credits have already run. His name has already run. Alex Garland has already been said on the screen.
What mattered the most to me, which is how I knew he stuck the landing. And I'll even say, in the moment in the theater, I was like, I kind of wish the tag wasn't there. But how I knew he stuck the landing was that for the first time, we visually see that her friend is pregnant.
Oh, yeah.
And I was afraid there was a boy inside her.
It's a man. Yes, exactly.
And I was like, boom. As soon as she revealed that belly, I was like, oh, no. And I think that might have even more to do with the way she looks at her. Jessie Buckley looks at her friend at the end.
But even if it's not, it's going to be another Jessie Buckley, and there's going to be a man that's going to be messing with that person's life.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just to clarify, do you remember? Because she did send a picture of that cottage and the naked man is standing in front of it to her friend. Did her friend comment on it?
Yeah,
did she recognize?
Yeah, they talked about it. Yeah. And actually, I thought it was weird that since they had the connection with the friend, that Jessie Buckley hung up the phone when she sees the guy outside finally. Which again, horror conventions. I'll use Scream because I'm from the '90s, but
we have to isolate
the guy when you see the guy outside your house.
Yes,
just like the strangers. It's like, oh my god, it's such a. I want to say so fun. This is not a fun. I shouldn't say fun because this particular movie situation with that is not fun. But in Scream, you're like, Drew Barrymore's gonna die. Like, oh, he's outside. Oh fuck, and she hangs up the phone rather than sit there and go, oh my God, they're on FaceTime, rather than go, oh my God. And she shows the friend, screenshot it or something. No, she hangs up the phone. Very curious about that. But yeah, she showed the friend, but the friend essentially for the sake of the movie didn't didn't really exist. Again, for the sake of the movie, because nobody who could help her saw the picture.
Well, and also that I love what you're saying, and I'll just push it even further that that whatever kind of a, thank goodness she's on the phone with her friend, whatever kind of feeling of safety that you might have because there's, this friend is kind of an island of reason. Like you feel like, oh my, at least she's talking to somebody.
As an audience.
Yeah, as a surrogate too. It was very effective to me that it didn't matter at all.
Yeah.
The fact that she did have this person that she could tell everything to. I thought there was I wasn't thinking about this at all from an intellectual place. It was affecting me. But looking back, what does that say about the fact that even this strength that might come from communion between a woman to another woman, maybe the only relationship where they can speak totally transparently about how they feel about what these men are making them, what they're doing to them. It didn't actually protect her at all. It ultimately didn't protect her from herself. It didn't protect her from the men that were around her. It didn't protect her from nature. It didn't protect her from any of these things, which I thought was incredibly poignant. And again, when she finally arrives, after they even make you think she's going to get there in time and save you, get out, very much like a lot of these movies where like, your friend is coming. Yeah. Don't worry, they'll be there soon.
Until she said how long it was going to take.
4 hours, you're like, all right, whatever. But yeah, that was really good. There was something else you said that made me want to say one last thing about the, what were you just talking about? The safety and the protection.
You want me to go through it again? Okay,
I do want you to kind of say every single thing you just fucking said because it made me queued up something.
The friend didn't matter. Maybe it was a woman inside the womb. It was a girl, Jessie Buckley. Faith. Nobody in the town who could help her believes her.
Something about the faith. It was. She didn't
really show
good.
The picture. It's funny that our audience
knows
exactly what it is. The cop.
The cop. Yeah, that was. Again, that was good that it showed the woman.
And then, of course, the male cop is like looking at her and you're like, oh, my God, the fuck. Of course, because you can't rely on the police.
Oh, that's what it was. Thank you. The woman is the first cop that she speaks to. But there was a male cop with her, partners, very realistic. And she runs into the male cop at the pub for the first time. And that line is in the trailer where she says, I saw a man, 3 times. And he says something like, he may not have even seen you once. I think Alex Garland did a really good job with very little dialogue. Thank you. All right, here we go. I know what I'm about to say. With very little dialogue and a lot of poetic cinema.
Thank you.
Can't wait thank you. Thank you. Of not even treading on the concept of victim shaming, which is such low-hanging fruit for a movie that's going to try to talk about this very sensitive issue. It's not complex. It's sensitive. I think he's right about the simplicity, which took me to a place where I feel like it was important for the victim shaming thing, for not being the victim shaming thing. I think it was important to try to understand why what she was going through wasn't, what am I trying to say? It wasn't just that it was happening to her and that she felt like she couldn't rely on the world around her to even hear what was happening to her. There was this was more than just the scream opening where someone's in the house.
It was her scream, by the way. She has like a Toni Collette scream in here, which is like, oh my God, it's so good. Sorry.
It is.
Keep going.
No, it's good. It's basically just that you said it at the very beginning of this, and I don't want to sound like I'm criticizing, some really successful allegorical films like Get Out and stuff, but I think Alex Garland took a very interesting road by not trying to talk about the issue. There was no explanations for how you were supposed to feel about these things. She didn't even get a chance to try to seek out understanding. So just to use Get Out as an example, and I still think it was successful, but it got a little talky for me when the last half of that movie was completely dedicated to him trying to literally hear it from everybody's mouth. What is happening? Yeah. What is happening? And eventually it kind of lost some steam for me because of that, just because you kind of can't help. I think we're hardwired when we're watching a movie that you kind of just want to start seeing it and you don't want to keep hearing about it. And even though there were some super, super effective sequences in Get Out. It depends
on what you're hardwired, depending on what you watch and what you are wired into.
I guess that's true. But I just feel like I thought he deserved a lot of respect for trying to say that I'm not going to try to discuss this. I'm not going to put her in a position of such inferiority that she thinks there's a way for someone to actually explain what's happening to her. She never actually said, "Why are you all the same man?" It never got touched on. It didn't. It never even got mentioned. And I thought that was just a A.O. Scott, just to kind of push back on him a little bit. He literally said like that there were no explanations here, and that might be part of why this allegory actually fails, is because it's so simple and it's so because there's it never gets taken to a higher level. He made some comment about that, how it's sustained, but that's like maybe that's the most it does. And I think that that's actually the glory of it. Yeah. Is that if you allow yourself to just feel it, then you're probably going to have to deal with that feeling more than be able to understand it. If you can talk about how you felt about this movie, good for you. You should probably never be able to say exactly what you think Alex Garland was trying to say. That's why it's successful.
Well, also, it's very obviously the reason that the Eve story has to be so obvious is that every other layer is less obvious because they're layering, and one of the layers is going to be your interpretation of it.
Yeah,
that's going to be a layer of the onion. Eve is the outer layer because it's too obvious. The poetry, laid on the swan, whatever. It's going to be like an inner layer, and somewhere in there is you, is where you stand in all this. And back to the pub. It's funny because it's tension, right? Tension builds comedy and horror and all this stuff. But so to be in the pub, she just wants a drink. Now, of course, this is a great play on convention, and this actually comes back to The Lost Daughter, where she just is like, "Oh, I'm going to the pub," and then of course, Ed Harris shows up, and it's like, it's like, this kind of stuff happens. And how many times people are like, "Oh, I just want to go to the pub for a drink," and it's like,
here comes a man.
And it's
trying to fuck you.
One man. It's 7 different versions of the same man. They're everywhere. Like you can't just be as a single woman in the middle of the fucking English countryside going out for. Now, of course, that's not entirely accurate. So if any sensitive men out there are listening, yes, that's right. There are plenty of pubs that. But at the same time, innocence is dead. So if it's easy for a man to say like you don't have anything to worry about because there's always something to worry about.
It's always the same thing. It's that exactly takes me back. It doesn't matter if that is even subjectively true. Sometimes it doesn't feel like that,
right?
Or at least that's what I think we're supposed to feel.
I bet you.
Jeff, do you remember?
Yeah.
When we were at Elon, Jeff and I went to Elon University, and I remember there was not a movement, but I can't remember. They did it at least once a year where they had this thing called Take Back the Night, and it was a march, a gathering in their quad and stuff. It was basically, in support of women literally taking back their right to be outside at night and not feel like they're going to get fucking attacked. And I remember I was like 18, 19 when I first experienced that. And I was like, I will never know what that feels like.
Oh yeah. I walked home late at night all the time. And I thought, I forgot when I walked people home, I was like, yeah, I'll walk you home. This is great. I didn't realize that I would never have to ask that question.
Yeah. So being a guy who I come on, everyone who listens to our podcast, like we can only speak about our own experience. I think that we try to be responsible, but we're also like, we have a sense of humor. Like we want to be able to joke about things. We want to push back when things get too PC, but every now and then something comes along that is going to affect you viscerally and emotionally. And art, I think, does that really well. So this was just so refreshing to just be reminded that, you know what, if it feels this way, it's at least important for us to acknowledge that the feeling might be very truthful, and you're going to have to deal with that. I don't know. And just the last thing, the Adam and Eve thing, because I think he was trying to it was so fucking indicative from the very beginning that you see it in the trailer. They didn't give a lot away in this trailer, but the apples falling out of the tree. Yeah, it's a beautiful, almost classic horrific image that something's happening that shouldn't happen physically. But ever since I was a kid, I've thought this, and this movie made me think about this. Is there any story that has been misinterpreted more than Adam and Eve? It's so clear that was written so that men could tell women, why did you do that?
You know who wrote that? Human men, not any
Human
deity of any
fucking
kind.
men. This was not squeezed out of the angel Gabriel.
Were they
this
short
was...
on time? The whole Genesis story really is basically like 7 days. The first day, one sentence. The second day,
give me back my rib, and stop eating that fucking apple. I mean, you know what it made me think of? I said this to Elizabeth too. I am catching up on Ozark. I'm in the fucking past, so I'm catching up on that. Sure. And there was a line in there where I can't remember what she was saying, but damn it, help me out. What's your name? The wife.
Laura Linney.
Laura Linney, amazing, talented, incredible Laura Linney. Where she's like, when she's kidnapped at one point, she's like, that fucking story. I bet they were just fucking starving, and she did what needed to be done, and she's been getting blamed for it since the blah blah blah. So I just feel like
it's probably a show of strength. She probably was like, I'll get a fucking apple.
Show of strength. We can raise it up all we want, but I just can't, again, just to have the courage to say, like, there is nothing that is more recognizable and accessible than the story of Adam and Eve. And Alex Garland just presents it to you, and he's like, deal with the fact that this is so obviously a misinterpretation, and we so obviously have done that for so long that this is why the rest of existence beyond this is absurd poetry. Because if you can't get on with board with the fact that men have been manipulating the truth of our entire Genesis, then you're going to be one of those people who's going to be trying to find a way out of understanding that there is another way to interpret life on this planet as a human being.
Also, be religious. The Adam and Eve didn't happen. All right, look how many different colors and different looks we all have. It just didn't happen, guys.
God, I wish we had our gush button so I could gush you on that.
Do you think the serpent was the that weird, because it was kind of Medusa looking? It kind of, the thing in the church that she kept like having the horror images of. Is that the serpent? Because the serpent isn't real in this particular story.
Yeah, the statue.
I wonder what is that? What is the statue? Because they kept cutting back to it. I wonder if that was the serpent, or if that was like the connection, if that was like the linchpin to help go between all of the different allegories to connect them all. Because they kept going back to it. It looked more like Medusa than a serpent, but I don't know.
I felt like it did look like Medusa.
You know what it looked like? It looked like a werewood tree from Game of Thrones. That's exactly what it looked like.
I think I just thought it kind of looked like, and again, this is one of those things where I just kind of let that like poetry, like I was trying not to be too literal about what is that, because it was such a wonderful connective tissue between, like, when he used it to cut back into time passed, the shadows passed across it, the light changed across it several times, and they would cut back to it. But ultimately, I thought it looked like what the Adam character turned into when he started becoming the apple tree. I started thinking, like, okay, that shadow was like representing, and again, God, this is so literal. And I don't think you're going to think about this stuff when you're watching it, but what are we talking about? A statue. What is this man becoming? A tree, which we think a tree has life and it's evolving. And put the Adam and Eve thing aside, what is he? What could that ultimately, what we're talking about right now? That it's literally written in stone, that it's going to become hardened and calloused, and there's not going to be a way to change it. And there's going to be this beauty and this ancient thing upon it. Like, you look at a statue in church and you just think that's the truth. In essence, I just think that he was just very, very beautifully poking holes in all of that shit. I don't know what else to say. Guys.
Wrap it up. I love the British countryside. I wish I saw more of it, but Innocence is dead, so I wasn't.
My goodness. That sequence when she was walking around the first time was really great. Beautiful and compelling.
And the sound. They did some pitch correction on her, they said, but like it was great. It was really cool to see. Yeah.
Dude, it was
the
beautiful.
Cotswolds. This takes place in the Cotswolds.
Yeah, we all know she had to repeat that several times. Yeah, that scene in the tunnel was excellent.
Plants everywhere. Jeffrey, this is great.
Look, you're only as good as your last film, or whatever the bullshit line is for how people,
that's not true. It's not true.
Yeah, it's not true. And when I first saw this trailer, I remember thinking, why is nobody talking about Alex Garland's next movie? He's pretty successful, and it was coming out, and what is this? Like, I guess we're still in the second quarter. Maybe we're not quite in the third quarter, which is a very typical time for, not their top choice movies to come out. Sometimes it's horror movies. And I was like, okay, maybe it's going to be another sleeper. Ex Machina was not presented spectacularly.
No,
I don't think,
if it wasn't for Amazon buying it, I don't know if I would have seen it.
Yeah, they did not roll that movie out super well either. No. So I had a lot of high hopes for this. I can't wait to meet him one day so I can tell him that I really, really, really like this movie. And I would challenge you guys to go out and try to see it in the theater if you can.
And you know what else I would say? I hope you've already been listening this long, so the movie's ruined if you have already seen it. But give it a day before you really start to like, before your thoughts before your thoughts get lucid. I know that's impossible because we see movies and we start thinking about them, but sleep on it.
I think you should. And I think that's going to prove to
I'm
you.
So glad because I was gonna end up having to see it today, and I was like, no, I'm gonna go until I went and saw it yesterday. I'm very glad I had 24 hours before I talked about it, because if I saw it day of, I wouldn't have thought less of it. It's just, I don't know. It's hard to explain. It's good to have a day with this kind of movie.
It's also, I promise to God, this is the last fucking thing that I'll say.
Yeah, promise.
This is the very last thing. This is another one. We talk about it all the time here. This is not a movie that is driven by story and that is driven by dialogue. And I think that I was very aware, I was conscious of this when we were watching it, because my theater was not very crowded at all. I was thinking, like, this is the kind of movie that we are moving away from. And you know what? I feel comfortable saying that it's closer to art than entertainment. And I just wonder what we're sacrificing by watching. Ozark's great, and I'm watching that now, and it's a really, really good show. But I just wonder what we're losing by having everything live into this serial, episodic nature of what's next. And if it doesn't have anything to do with plot, that we might be less interested in it. And I think that I have a feeling when this does go to streaming that very few people are going to finish it. I think a lot of people might give it a shot if it gets recommended to them, and then it's going to start getting weird, and they're going to be like, ew, and they're going to turn it off because they want to feel good, or they want to feel something more understandable.
I hope you're wrong. I hope the horror carries them through, even though it's a subversion of the genre, and he's almost like fucking with us with the genre. That's not what this movie's about, but hopefully it does keep people entertained enough to keep going. We'll see.
I think it will. All right, man. What have you been watching? I'm going to pimp you out first. What the fuck have you been watching, dude?
What have I been watching? Well, last week we went into the vault. We went into our stock. So I basically had 2 weeks. You know, it's going to sound like I watched a lot, but I rewatched both The Batman and Dune. I was curious what they would look like on TV. And I didn't even mean, I think The Batman, they each took me 2 tries, meaning not 2 tries as in I didn't like it. 2 tries as in like I watched it like a TV show. Like I broke it into 2 parts, and they both hung. And I will say this about Dune: I can't wait to see the next one.
Dude, I told you I saw it twice, and the second time I saw it in the theater, I was like, I needed to see it a second time.
I was actually bummed because now I'm spoiled by Lord of the Rings and those other series where I was like, I want to see what happens next.
Yeah, me too.
I didn't want to stop, even though it's kind of long. And yeah, you could say it's kind of slow. I know other people were like, you know, not a lot happened, blah blah blah. But I was like, I was so on board with the story, and it was slow, and I was like, okay, well now give me the payoff. The second movie's always the one, right? Empire or Two Towers. Hobbit does not count, but like, you know, usually the second one.
I am so glad to hear you say that, because I can't remember if I said it on this show, but I remember after we saw it the second time, I remember thinking, I know that if it's what we think it's going to be, I think rewatching the whole 1, 2, if it's 3, I can't remember. I think it's just 2 big movies. I think watching those together are going to be awesome.
I hope, honestly, I say this as somebody who loves the fact that this is an hour and 40 minutes, this movie we just talked about. I hope the next movie is just 3 hours.
They just fucking go for it. There is a lot that needs to happen.
There's a huge sequence that's coming up pretty quickly, the next one, and so I hope they just do it pretty quickly, and then they go on, and I just hope they give us the monster second movie, because too often studios break it up into 3, 4, they overdo it, and so
I think it's just going to be 2. I know he's in 2 right now, and I think that's where that book ends.
And the Batman was good too, but it definitely felt longer on TV than it did in the theaters, and I hope the next one is different. I hope it's almost like an episodic, you know.
All I've thought about with the Batman is that chase sequence in the middle. That's the only thing I kind of want to just put on some good headphones and just blast it.
I watched some TV too, but that's pretty much it. What about you?
I finished Winning Time. I finally remember I had not watched the last episode. Super fun. Hell yeah! Can't wait for the next.
They're going to keep going. Do you think it was cast so well? The actors were green going into this, and they just were the parts, but do you think it caught up with them?
No, I think it was okay. I thought it worked.
I mean, John C. Reilly's a hero and legend. Sally Field, even Jeannie and who plays the new VP? Who plays what's her name? She's in Transparent.
She's in Transparent.
You know
yeah,
what I mean?
What is her? Yeah.
Brilliant. But like Magic and Kareem, they gave them a lot of work, and they were cast so well, and they were so great, and they were so charming. 10 episodes is a lot, and I was just wondering if, well, they have another season, so I'm very curious to see where it's going to go. It started to get too theological. There wasn't a lot of basketball on the show, which is great, but I'm curious to see where they go next.
Yeah, me too, because I have no idea. I don't know anything about that dynasty other than they were good, and
they don't win the next year, but I know Pat Riley takes over, so Adrian Brody just
I think honestly, if I'm more excited than anything else, it's just because from a distance I do know
Tracy
about
Letts,
Pat Riley.
Tracy Letts is the best part of the. I mean, John C. Reilly was good. They were great, but Tracy Letts, man, he was so good at this goddamn show with Carrie Coon as yeah. Sorry, okay, sorry. What else were you watching?
He is so good. Did that Ozark, and then I watched. God damn it! I watched a documentary and I can't remember. But anyway, mostly been watching Ozark. Everything you've heard is true.
Yeah,
it's good. I'm watching it. I am just out. What I'm realizing more than anything else, though, is that I'm just been so busy this year. I'm just out of practice with series. I struggle. I feel like I'm putting in a little bit of work to watch fucking 30 hours of television. I don't feel like I should be guilty for saying that. That's a ridiculous amount of content to have to watch.
When people say like you should watch this, and I'm like I'm a season behind, they like catch up, and it's like you just told me to just spend 20 hours on something.
Didn't you rewatch Game of Thrones before the final season? It was like 90 hours of TV. I know there was a while where I was doing the same thing, where I could just sit down and I could watch like 6 hours of television.
That's different, though. I didn't watch it religiously. You know, I didn't sit there and be like, okay, now I watched it because I knew I could stop it if I wanted to, and of course I didn't. But right now, like the other day, part of the reason I watched Dune again is because I started 3 different shows, and I was like, I'm not feeling
any of this stuff. Yeah. No,
I did that. Hacks this season and Barry, and I'm going to get back on both of them, but there was something about those first episodes where I was like, feels a little too written.
Yeah.
Feels a little too scripted. Comedies, I have to say this, and I like these shows a lot. The best, I'll just use The Office as an example because it's the most streamed show during the pandemic. Everybody questioned whether or not they were improvising on The Office. The actors had to say, we promise it was written, because we thought it was so Seinfeld. Like, you almost forget that they're writers. I never thought that there weren't writers watching these shows, and I really wish it just felt a little looser. It feels like they're all trying to act, and I was like, you cast comedians because they're funny, not because they can act. Let them be funny, and that's where I am. And we'll see. There's plenty of time. It's early in the season. Maybe they just had to get the storylines going, and then they can have some fun. But I was like, they're plotting, and I don't, we'll get there.
Oh, I watched Me and Orson Welles. Thank you. Sorry, I was listening to you talk. That's Richard Linklater is being featured on the Criterion app right now, and it's like Zac Efron, and the guy who plays Orson Welles is awesome. I don't think everybody needs to rush out and see that movie, but if you like Richard Linklater, and if you're interested in RKO and the Orson Welles Theater Company and at the period, I still had fun, and he's got a lot of good movies on there. I still need to watch Scanner Darkly, but yeah, that was what I watched.
All right,
that was it.
Here for one of our longest episodes. Amazing.
We'll see you,
folks, next week. Can't wait. John, pleasure.
Fun stuff.
Thanks.
All right, film fans.
Take it easy.
Peace.